boring lost civilizations that sank, crumbled, or just stopped writing back to sleep. You're not here for empires that roared. Not tonight. You're here for the hush, the slow unraveling of time, the cities that left without slamming the door, the ones that didn't burn, just ... stopped tonight. We drift across ruins that never asked to be remembered, fortresses sunken under salt winds, temples buried in their own silence, and kingdoms that erased their names on purpose. Each place we visit has already fallen, but none of them are gone. They echo in dust, in patterns of stone, in sleep, so lie back. Let your breath match the rhythm of forgotten cities. Let the weight of history dissolve into calm, and let these boring, beautiful ruins carry you gently out of the waking world. The wind hums gently across a dry plateau, and your footsteps slow. You are not here to arrive. You are here to remember something older than the wheel, older than script, older than cities that knew their names. There is no city wall, no broken gate, no fallen columns of a forgotten empire, only a hill, quiet and round, resting under Turkish sky. And beneath it sleep the first stones we ever raised just for wonder, not to survive, not to shelter, but to gather, to shape space, to ask the sky to stay. This is Göbekli Tepe, and it remembers you. You stand above it first, the way the archaeologists first did, seeing only a gentle mound. But when the earth was peeled back, it revealed rings of standing stones, tall and thin and older than agriculture. Massive, T-shaped pillars in arranged circles, some over 16 feet tall, some carved with foxes, snakes, birds, lions, not myths, but something quieter, motifs, symbols, glimpses of meaning we once had, no need to name. You step down into one of the circles now. It is cooler here, protected. The stones loom around you like sentinels, not cold, just still. You notice how some of them lean, how some were set in pairs, and in the center of each ring, two larger pillars stand like figures, mid-conversation, like hands raised to catch the moon. There are no houses here, no burials, no ovens or tools of daily life. It wasn't a village. It was a gathering, a ceremony shaped in limestone. You let your fingers hover just above the carvings. A vulture with wings spread wide, a scorpion, a headless man. They don't frighten you. They feel like dreams told again and again until they lost their sharpness. These were stories passed not by sentence but by circle. There was rhythm in the construction, in the carving, in the way we once stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the night sky. No one knows exactly what Göbekli Tepe was. A temple, maybe, or a memory, or a message to time. It was built 11,000 years ago, when people still roamed in bands, hunted wild sheep, gathered seeds without planting. They came here, it seems, to build something bigger than their hunger, something heavier than their bodies. They carved stone not for protection, but for presence. They imagined space, sacredness, the feeling of standing still with others under something vast. And then, strangely, they buried it. They filled the circles with dirt, carefully, gently, almost reverently, like tucking in a child after a long night of dancing. And they built new circles above the old ones, simpler, smaller, as if forgetting wasn't failure, it was evolution, as if memory, too, must soften. You walk the outer edge now. You see half-finished walls, the foundations of pillars never raised. Not destruction, just pause. Göbekli Tepe was never finished, but it was complete. Like a thought, mid-sentence, that still says enough. There is no writing here. But you feel spoken to. Maybe this wasn't the beginning of civilization. Maybe it was the end of something else. The final fireside, before the farms came, before stories became fixed in lines and pages. Maybe Göbekli Tepe is what happens when a species realizes it can make meaning and chooses to do it, not with conquest, but with shared stillness. You sit down near a half-buried ring. The wind carries a fine dust that tastes like limestone and silence. You close your eyes and see it flickering torchlight, shadowed figures lifting stones together, someone carving a fox into fresh stone. Not to command it, just to remember it. You don't dream of kings or cities. You dream of the way breath might have echoed through stone, of how feet moved slowly around the circle, of the softness of night pressing down on a gathering that needed no name. Göbekli Tepe does not whisper answers. It hums a question that never needed solving. You lie back now on the packed earth above its deepest ring, your body still, your breath slow. The stars are where they've always been, but somehow they seem closer from here. The city forgot to finish its walls, but it remembered how to begin. And you, resting now in the long echo of its silence, remember too, not with your mind, but with your bones and your sleep. The ocean reaches toward you in long, even breaths. It does not crash or roar, not tonight. It arrives like memory, soft-edged and rhythmic, brushing the Peruvian shore with the same motion it has offered for thousands of years. You are standing on the fringe of something vast, not just in space, but in time. To your left, the desert yawns wide and ancient. To your right, the Pacific glows under a slipping moon. And behind you, something stirs, not wind, not waves, but the slow unveiling of a city shaped by salt, sand, and silence. The city does not rise like others do. It does not call you upward with towers or glittering marble. It lies low, woven into the earth like a second skin. Its walls are high but muted, its roads long but sunken. This is Chan, the capital of the Chima civilization, a city built entirely of adobe, earth molded by hand, dried by wind, and hardened by centuries. It once stretched 9 square miles, the largest adobe city in the world, home to tens of thousands, perhaps more. But it breathes quietly now, as if trying not to wake the past too abruptly. You step through one of its many ceremonial corridors, and your footsteps are muffled by time. The walls on either side are covered in patterns, fish, birds, waves repeating like lullabies in sand. No two corridors are exactly alike. Some curve gently, others fold sharply. Some end in chambers filled with geometric reliefs, their purpose half-guessed. These designs are not decorative flourishes. They are maps, rhythms, marks of ritual and tide, pressed into mud with memory instead of ink. The Chima did not leave behind books. Their thoughts were not recorded in alphabet, but in layout and material, in the way their cities echoed the logic of water. You feel it as you walk. This place is tidal. Courtyards open like shells. Palaces channel the breeze. Reservoirs reflect the sky as though trying to hold it gently in place. Everything in this city seems built with an awareness of something greater, a force that moves invisibly, shaping not just sand, but spirit. The Chima revered the moon more than the sun. In their eyes, the moon controlled the tides, the crops, the rains, life itself. Its light was softer, more constant, more reliable. Where other civilizations burned for daylight and sun gods, the Chima found rhythm in the night. Their temples faced the stars. Their rituals followed lunar phases. Their silence glowed silver. You sit now in the shadow of a once grand palace. Its adobe walls still standing in tired grace. The heat of the day has fallen away, and the desert air carries a cool hush. You imagine the city alive around you. Artisans shaping vessels. Priests walking slowly in procession. Children crouched at the edge of a canal, watching the moon's reflection ripple through still water. Everything is made of earth here. Not just the buildings, but the customs, the stories, the bones beneath the floor. Earth molded and unmolded by time. The Chima were engineers as much as dreamers. They built vast canals that pulled water from the Andean foothills to irrigate the coastal desert. They carved agricultural terraces into slopes and managed a delicate economy through craft and trade. Their society was intricate, hierarchical, deeply ordered, yet rooted in something organic. They understood power not just as control, but as balance, a quiet weaving of needs and seasons. But power also makes noise, and eventually it calls to other powers. In the late 15th century, the Chima met the Inca. Their encounter was not one of mutual greeting, but of absorption. The Inca, with their roads and their force, moved northward and swallowed Chan into their own expanding story. The Chima did not collapse all at once, but their moon lost its place in the sky. Their temples were not burned, but repurposed. Their canals redirected. Their patterns echoed but faded. What was tidal became linear. What was whispered became silenced. You wrung your fingers along a crumbling wall, and the dust it leaves on your skin feels warm. This is not ruin, it is memory. Mid-sentence, the adobe walls were never meant to last forever. They were meant to carry meaning through time until the wind could take over, and so it has. Wind now carves the same lines the people once etched with care. In some places, the reliefs are still clear. Fish with curved tails, pelicans mid-flight, frozen not in victory, but in continuation. You lie back in one of the city's sunken plazas, where ceremonies may have been held under moonlight. The stars above Chan seem more numerous tonight, as if responding to a city that once called to them in patterns. The air smells faintly of salt and clay. Your body settles into the cool earth, and you begin to understand how a civilization could choose the moon over the sun. There is something more intimate about this kind of light. It does not illuminate, it invites, and in this soft invitation, your breath slows. You don't need to decipher the symbols on the walls. You don't need to restore the canals or name the rooms. The city has already released its need to be understood. It asks only to be noticed gently, to be remembered not through analysis, but through stillness, through sleep. You close your eyes beneath the moon that once ruled tides and hearts. You imagine it reflected in a quiet reservoir, watched by a priest whose words have long since faded. You picture the slow sculpting of adobe bricks, shaped with hands, dried in light, carried stone by stone into alignment. There is no hurry. The city is not waiting to be discovered. It is already dreaming. The Chima mapped the sky not with instruments, but with firelight and memory. They built a city to echo that dream. And though its name has been dusted over and recast in other tongues, it remains, not in conquest, but in rhythm, and you, breath soft, muscles unwound, gaze turned inward, begin to drift like a slow tide returning to shore. The moon still hangs above you. The earth still cradles you. The city does not need to speak again. It only needs you to sleep. There is no city here, no crumbling temple, no broken wall etched with forgotten alphabets. There is only water, wide and grey and infinite, stretching from the coast of England to the edges of Denmark, stirred by wind and tide. The sea rolls gently tonight. Its surface is smooth as brushed steel, the kind of calm that almost hums, and beneath it, far beneath, under layers of salt and time and sediment, sleeps a land that once breathed with firelight footsteps and a simple rhythm of ordinary days. This place was called Doggerland, though those who lived here never named it that. They didn't need a name. It was simply where they were, a vast green plain that stretched across what is now the North Sea, a land of rivers and wetlands, of deer and mammoth and quiet fires beside shallow lakes. 10,000 years ago, this wasn't ocean, it was home. You imagine it now, not as a ruin, but as a memory folded gently under water. The land was low and soft, carved by glacial melt, fertile and wide. Herds moved through forests of birch and pine. Birds sang along reed-thick streams. People, small bands of them, walked barefoot through grass, still wet with morning mist. They hunted, gathered, carved tools from antler and bone. They spoke with hands and glances, not writing. They carried nothing they couldn't hold in their arms or remember in a song. There were no monuments here, no temples to mark the sacred. Everything was sacred, the way the moonlight fell through trees, the flicker of a fish in shallow water, the warmth of a fire against cold fog. These were the things they shaped their lives around, not permanence, but presence. You lean now against a railing near the modern coast, looking out across a sea that swallowed that world slowly. The change wasn't sudden, it happened over centuries, like breath exhaled in slow motion. As the last ice age ended, glaciers melted, oceans rose, and the rivers that once meandered through Doggerland's heart began to merge with the sea. Lakes widened, marshes crept inward, camps were abandoned and moved to higher ground. No one panicked, they adjusted, until one day the ground they walked on simply wasn't there anymore, and now it's all beneath the waves. You close your eyes and let the sound of the sea wash over you, not just as sound, but as memory. The sea carries pieces of that lost world. Fishermen sometimes pull up ancient bones tangled in nets, a reindeer jaw, a worked flint tool, a fragment of skull with traces of red ochre. These are not treasures, they are remnants, faint echoes of a life lived quietly, erased slowly, remembered only when disturbed. There is something gentle about Doggerland's disappearance. It wasn't war that ended it. No burning cities or collapsing walls. Just water, just time. Just a world slowly changing shape beneath the feet of those who once called it home. Their stories weren't written down, but they linger in the grains of pollen buried deep beneath the seabed, in a scatter of arrowheads once left behind on a riverbank that no longer exists, in the way a bird might still migrate across the same invisible path, remembering what the land has forgotten. You lie back now on a quiet patch of beach, eyes open to the darkening sky. The stars begin to appear, soft, flickering, and you wonder if someone else once looked up from this same place when it was grass, not sand. Maybe they held a child in their arms. Maybe they cooked fish on an open fire. Maybe they simply watched the sky and thought about tomorrow. You are not so different from them. You breathe the same air, feel the same pull toward stillness, look for meaning in silence. The sea moves closer as you rest. Not threatening, just steady, like time, like breath. It doesn't need to explain where the land went. It only needs you to listen. Beneath its surface, Doggerland dreams. It dreams of elk trails and fire circles, of bare feet in cold rivers, of hands carving tools from the curve of a bone. It dreams without maps, without monuments, without names. And in its dreaming, it leaves room for yours. You don't need to see the ruins. You don't need to translate the past. You only need to be here now, with the water whispering just beyond your reach, and your body slowly softening into the memory of something vast and simple. The land may be gone, but the rhythm remains. In the sea, in your breath. In sleep, Doggerland does not rise. It rests, and so do you. High above the plains, where the sky stretches open like a canvas still. Being painted, you walk through thin air. Each breath feels lighter here, not because it's easier, but because the world has thinned out around you, like a whisper that's grown old with wind. You're in the Bolivian Altiplano now, over 12,000 feet above the sea, where clouds drift low and wide, and the ground feels as if it's closer to space than to sea level. It is quiet in a way that cities rarely are. Not deserted, sacred, as if even the silence here was once carved into stone. The earth around you is flat and endless, cracked in places, tufted with dry grass and saltbrush. But in the midst of it all, out of alignment with anything modern, the ruins of Teotihuacan stand solemn and unmoving, not proud, not broken, just there, exactly where they have always been. No hills cradle them, no mountains guard them. They rise from the plateau like thoughts that hardened into shape, weathered blocks, stairways leading nowhere, and gates that open into sky. Teotihuacan does not look like a city. It looks like an idea someone once had about how to speak to the divine. You wander through the remnants, not as a tourist, not even as a historian, but as a listener. The stones are enormous, and they rest not by chance. Some weigh more than 100 tons, yet they were moved, shaped, and locked together with a precision that makes metal tools seem clumsy by comparison. There is a pattern here, though it no longer has a key. The walls are not just walls, they are alignments, sight lines, measurements, a conversation between heaven and earth told in shadow and stone. You pass the famous Gate of the Sun, a single monolith carved with figures that no longer speak a known language. The central figure has rays around its head, like light rendered in stone. Some say it is Viracocha, the Andean creator god. Others say it is time itself, marked by calendars no longer synced to anything but memory. The lintel above your head was once part of something larger. A doorway, yes, but a doorway into what? Ceremony? Sky watching. You look through it now and see only clouds, as if the gods moved on and forgot to close the door behind them. The mystery of Teotihuacan is not in how it ended, but in how much of it remains unexplained. There are underground chambers aligned to the solstices, recessed niches in walls where faces used to sit, stone heads from other cultures placed there like offerings or reminders. There are reservoirs, drains, channels for water that no longer flows. It was a city, yes, but not one of noise and markets. It was not built for defense or trade. It was built to speak, not to humans, but to something else, something higher, something now long silent. You pause beside one of the giant stones, your hand resting on its smooth edge. There's no mortar holding it in place, only precision. each corner polished and balanced until the blocks settle into one another like thought into memory. You imagine the labor it took, not as sweat and suffering, but as ritual, as collective focus. These stones were not just quarried, they were dreamed into position, each one a syllable in a language whose last speaker has long since fallen asleep. Tiahuanaco's people left behind no books, no detailed records. Their descendants, the Tiwanaku culture, faded long before the Inca arrived. Drought may have come, or the lake may have retreated, or maybe time just did what it always does. It turned its face and walked on. But the city stayed. It didn't fall, it didn't burn. It simply remained, like an unanswered prayer carved so deeply into the ground that even forgetting couldn't erase it. You sit on one of the low stone benches that line the site, letting the highland wind press against your back. The air here is cold but thin, and it moves like memory, quietly persistent, always returning. The sky deepens toward evening, and long shadows stretch from every pillar. You close your eyes and listen, not for music, not for stories, just for the space between the stones. You hear it, not sound, but presence. A city that once believed the sky would speak back. Tiahuanaco is not gone. It is unfinished, incomplete in the way the stars are, not missing pieces, just asking the wrong questions. Maybe it was never meant to be understood. Maybe it was enough to build, to align, to listen. And maybe that is still enough. Maybe the quiet cities are the ones that knew when to stop talking. The wind brushes your face and your breath slows. You're not thinking anymore, just resting, just being. You've walked among stones that outlasted their language, stepped through gates that were never meant to close, and now you lie on the earth that still remembers. There are no gods here to greet you, but there is something better, stillness, enormous and complete. Tiahuanaco does not ask for belief, it asks for silence. And you, wrapped now in sleep's gentle approach, answer. You find yourself in a place where the land breathes with history, though the voices that once filled it are long since hushed. The ground beneath your feet is dark, rich, and ancient, soil layered with memory, buried roads, and the ghosts of forgotten scripts. The air is warm here, dry but not lifeless, carrying the scent of dust and incense, eucalyptus and quiet stone. You are in what was once the beating heart of the kingdom of Axum, a place whose name once travelled on the wind between Rome and India, whispered in merchant tongues, written in ledgers. Carved in stone, the city no longer spreads out before you the way it once did. Time has trimmed its edges, softened its streets, quieted its markets. But some things remain, things not erased, but simply resting. You walk slowly past towering stone, steely, ancient obelisks that lean into the sky like bookmarks left in the chapters of a lost epic. One is cracked, its top missing. Another stands perfectly upright, fluted and engraved to mimic buildings that may no longer exist. They do not mark graves, not always. Some mark memory, some mark sovereignty. Some mark nothing at all but the insistence of presence. Axum was an empire that knew how to wait in silence. It sat in the northern highlands of what is now Ethiopia, near the Red Sea, watching the world move, not hurriedly, but attentively. Ships docked at its ports. Gold passed through its hands. Elephants were traded, ivory carved, frankincense carried across deserts and onto vessels headed east. They minted coins in gold and silver. They carved their alphabet into stone, Giez, a language still sung in the liturgies of old churches today. This was not a minor place, it was a center. But now, as the wind brushes the worn edges of a carved tablet at your feet, you feel how quiet centers become over time. You walk beneath the outline of a former palace, its foundation still marking where walls once held kings and thoughts and councils. The stones are sun-warmed and light-colored, their seams softened by centuries of breath and rain. You imagine the rooms, not lavish, but learned. The kingdom of Aksem was among the first in the world to adopt Christianity, but its faith was layered over older roots, South Arabian influences, local gods, sun discs, moon faces, and sacred groves where silence was itself a kind of liturgy. Their theology was not loud, it was carved. The libraries of Aksum did not survive, or if they did, they are buried deep, waiting beneath layers of silt and stone. You imagine them, scrolls resting in alcoves, records written in Ge'ez or Greek, prayers transcribed by candlelight, trade logs marking shipments from far-off ports. You think of knowledge stored not in vast towers, but in voices, in monks who memorized whole books, in elders who recited lineages back 100 generations. When the voices died, the pages disappeared too, or turned to dust before they could be passed forward. You pause beside a carved stone throne, now only partly upright. You rest your hand on its surface and feel the faint impressions of chisel, marks left by someone who never imagined their work would be unread. There's a heaviness in the forgotten, not of loss, but of suspension, as if all that knowledge, all those names and thoughts, still hover just beneath the surface, waiting for someone calm enough to listen, not with ears, but with stillness. Aksum's decline was not marked by fire or conquest. It was a long quieting. Trade routes shifted, the sea moved away, the soil thinned, and gradually the city pulled inward, let go of its outer edges, became smaller, softer, less imperial, but not less meaningful. Its stories moved into churches, into chants, into whispered lineages. Its memory became oral, then sacred, then vague. But even now, in the streets of modern Aksum, echoes still walk, in the cadence of voices, the shapes of eyes, the curve of stone. You step into the shade of a high arch, the last of its line, a gate to nowhere now but sky. The sun is low, the air folds around you like parchment. You sit and breathe, and remember without remembering. You do not need to know all the names. You do not need the full alphabet. You only need to feel that this place was once full, with thought, with language, with belief, and that fullness still hums beneath the silence. The wind moves slowly here. It turns pages that no longer exist. It touches corners of temples that have crumbled into the earth. It drifts through the gaps in broken, steely, and over walls that still remember where they stood. You close your eyes. You picture the library. Again, not one of walls and shelves, but of voices and eyes and memory passed hand to hand. You imagine the breath of a teacher in a small stone room, reciting from memory what no longer lives on paper. And then you rest, not from fatigue, but from fullness. The kingdom doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be felt. It needs to be heard in the hush of its surviving stones, in the weight of dust that settled not in collapse, but in grace, in the calm that remains when empires no longer insist on being seen. Aksum may have burned, or it may have simply blinked slowly and returned to dreaming. And now, so do you. You find yourself drifting inward, carried eastward into the green cradle of the Sichuan basin, where mist clings to bamboo groves and rivers move like time. Slow, curving, certain. It is not a place known for desert or dust or palaces in ruin. Instead, it is quiet farmland now, soft hills, distant mountains. You would never guess that just beneath the soil here, gods once stared with eyes wide and strange eyes that saw the sky not as comfort, but as command. You walk now through a narrow path lined with reeds, the ground soft beneath your steps. The air is thick with the scent of water and deep earth. Nearby, a small museum gleams under glass and steel, but that's not where you're going, not yet. You're going where the story began in 1929, when a farmer digging a ditch struck something that wasn't stone and wasn't wood. It was jade, then bronze, then gold, and beneath the fields, a forgotten world stirred. This is Sank, a civilization that left no clear trace in the scrolls of dynasties or the myths passed down in ink. It appeared brilliantly and suddenly, and then disappeared, not in smoke, not in battle, but into silence. What was found in its ruins is not architecture or city plans. It is presence. Over 100 bronze masks with exaggerated features, eyes bulging and serene, ears like wings, mouths tight with intention. These were not portraits. These were gods, or visions, or something no longer remembered. You picture one of them now. Tall, inhuman, beautiful and eerie. A mask with curling eyebrows, pupils made not to blink. Gold sheets pressed over delicate contours. Arms, massive and elongated, reaching forward to hold something that is no longer there. You try to place the meaning, but it slips like water through your thoughts. It wasn't made to explain. It was made to connect. Sankdui has no known writing system, no tombs, no royal inscriptions. It does not sit neatly within the lines of Chinese history as it has been recorded, and yet it was advanced. Bronze so pure and so intricate that even modern tools would struggle to mimic it. Jade, carved with precision. Silk remnants, lacquered wood, elephant tusks transported over distances that would have taken weeks or months. This wasn't a village of chance. It was a center, but of what? You wander now into the imagined ritual space. There are no walls here, but your mind supplies them. Pillars of timber long since rotted, courtyards lit by torchlight, priestly hands moving slowly through gesture and song. The people here believed in connection between earth and sky, between human and divine, and yet they buried it all. Carefully, purposefully, they dug deep pits and placed their gods inside. They shattered the bronze, burned the wood, layered it all ivory, jade, gold, and sealed it underground. Why not conquest? There are no signs of invasion, no mass graves, no scorched earth, just ... absence, a voluntary ending or transformation. Perhaps they moved. Perhaps they changed who they were so completely that they never looked back. Perhaps the gods they once raised high were no longer needed or became too powerful to remain. So they were lowered back into the soil like seeds, like memories. You sit on the edge of one of these pits now, not in the real museum, but in the space of your imagination, which is often more honest than archaeology. The soil is dark, cool, still, and inside, under layers of protective earth, those strange, magnificent faces still wait. Not to be resurrected, not to be solved, but to be felt. Their eyes wide and unwavering, do not demand sleep. They allow it. The civilization of Sank flourished for centuries, then stopped. Not in failure, in choice. Maybe they saw what we can't, that not every story needs a sequel, that some mysteries are meant to rest, that some gods are not meant to be worshipped forever, but only long enough to understand the beauty of letting go. You feel your breathing slow. The air thickens into comfort. There's no urgency here. The lake nearby is still. The moonlight, if it reaches down this far, touches only the tops of the masks, where gold flakes have begun to dull into green. These faces, sharp and strange, were never meant to be understood, only remembered, or half-remembered, or dreamed. And now, as you lie still beside the imagined pit, eyes closed and body weightless, the gods of Sank do not judge your forgetting. They have already been forgotten once, buried with care. They know how to sleep, so now you do too. The wind comes first, low and wandering, curling through the grasslands in long invisible ribbons. It doesn't rush, it loops and listens. It runs its fingers over granite walls that no longer guard anything, gliding across stone towers that still stand, not because they were meant to last forever, but because nobody asked them to fall. You are in the southern highlands of Africa now, where the earth is dry and ancient and folded into slow hills. Nothing announces itself loudly here, not even the ruins. You walk forward, and there it is, great Zimbabwe, a city not built to rise into the heavens or pierce the clouds, but to coil with the land, to echo the curves of the world it belonged to. Its walls are tall, yes, some over 30 feet, but they wind like thought, not like conquest. There is no mortar. Each stone was placed with hands that understood pressure and balance better than mathematics. The walls do not scream, they murmur. You follow one wall now, its path uneven but steady, built from granite blocks, shaped and set by people who did not need straight lines to define importance. The stone is warm in the sun. You touch it, and it does not speak back, not with words, anyway, but your body feels the weight of it, the hush, the endurance. This was a place of power, but not of noise. A kingdom ruled not by silence, but by the absence of needing to shout at its height. This was a capital, a trading center of gold, ivory, cattle, and knowledge. Goods moved from here to the coast, and from the coast to far places, Arabia, Persia, China. People who lived here over 1,000 years ago wore imported glass beads and Chinese porcelain. They played music, held ceremonies, raised families, worshipped gods, yet no written record survives. No archive, no scroll, no stone inscription telling who ruled or how. The city exists like breath held in stone, complete but quiet. And its story, too, was nearly lost. For generations, outsiders refused to believe that an African people built this. They imagined foreign hands, Egyptian engineers, Arab settlers. But the truth has long since surfaced, quiet and unyielding. This was made by the Shona ancestors of the people still living nearby, whose hands, voices, and memories are shaped. From the same soil, you pause at the great enclosure, the most famous part of the city. A circular wall loops around you like an embrace, enclosing an inner tower that rises like a thought not yet explained. Its purpose is still unknown. Some say it was religious, some say royal, but standing beside it, you feel none of that. You feel rhythm, deliberate architecture. Maybe it was built simply to mark space, to say, we are here and this matters. There are no palaces left, no grand statues, no roads paved in glory. But there is presence subtle and steady, a reminder that not all great civilizations sought permanence through monument or memory. Some left behind shape instead of sentence, stone instead of chronicle, wind instead of trumpet. You walk along one of the narrow passageways that twist between towering stone walls, and you begin to understand why this city was once compared to a labyrinth. Not because it was meant to trap, but because it invites wandering. You cannot rush through this place. It slows you, asks you to move differently, to feel rather than interpret. There are no signs telling you what happened here. The story isn't told, it's felt. Birds sing in the trees growing through the ruins. Lizards sun themselves on old steps. A breeze stirs the tall yellow grass that now grows where people once gathered. Everything is returning to the earth, not in decay, but in calm. You sit where a hearth might have once burned. You imagine food shared, stories passed between generations, songs sung not to be recorded, but simply to mark a night, a mood, a season. And now, you lie back on the dry ground, the stones curving high above you. There is no ceiling, the sky is enough. You stare into it, letting your breath match the rhythm of this place, slow, circular, grounded. Great Zimbabwe doesn't reach upward, it holds the earth. It asks nothing from you except stillness. And in that stillness, you feel something. Shift, not grandly, but like the first yawn of sleep. There are stories here, but they do not insist on being told. They fold themselves into wind and wall and weight. Great Zimbabwe has not vanished. It simply stopped shouting. It moved into a form of memory that lives below language, beneath noise, inside silence. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and your body softens into rest, you join it, not as a visitor, but as one more sleeper under the same wind before cities, before kings, before writing and wheel, before the pyramids rose from the Nile's banks or temples crowned the hills of Mesopotamia. There was this place, Nabta, not a city in the way we understand cities, but a clearing in the desert, quiet and vast, where the sky was everything and the stones were arranged to listen. You are standing now where time itself once leaned low and close, not to conquer, but to whisper. The desert around you is not empty. It is full of the kind of silence that gathers only when wind and memory agree to hold their breath. You see, number buildings, no walls, no roads, but the sand beneath your feet rests on thousands of years of memory. Just beneath it, or barely rising from it, are circles of stone, slabs upright in patterns, alignments traced with care so deep it still echoes into the stars. Nabta lies in southern Egypt, deep in the Sahara, 1,000 miles from the ocean and far from anything that might have resembled civilization. And yet, over 7,000 years ago, before Stonehenge, before the first pharaohs, people gathered here and marked the sky with stones, not randomly, not accidentally. They measured solstices. They mapped star paths. They waited for rain and they counted its rhythm in shadows. You imagine one of them now, a tall woman in a linen wrap, her skin dark from sun, standing at dawn beside a flat-topped slab, watching the horizon shift with the season. Her eyes are calm. She is not guessing. She is remembering. Behind her, others stir, people of a community small in number, but vast in knowing. They move between the stone markers like readers between lines. There is no book here, but there is story. One told in shadow and silence, in light cast long by celestial timing. The people who lived here were They moved with their cattle. They watched the skies not for philosophy, but for survival. The rains mattered, the lake mattered, the rhythm of the sun and the migration of birds mattered. Nabda wasn't a place of permanence. It was a returning point, a seasonal sacred. Every year, when the sky tipped just right and the water returned to the basin, they came back. And each time they remembered. And then they built. You step gently among the stone circles. Some have been reburied by time, others reconstructed by archaeologists, but their presence remains undeniable. The largest alignments match the summer. Solstice, the moment when the sun shifts its gaze and begins to step back toward darkness. These stones, crude at first glance, are not decorations. They are instruments. They listened to the sky before we had clocks, before we drew lines between stars and named them gods. These people watched, and then they marked what they saw, so others would know when to plant, when to move, when to wait. You sit now in the center of one of these circles. The sand is cool beneath you. The wind lifts lightly at the edge of your clothes. No one speaks. Not because there is nothing to say, but because silence is enough. You begin to feel it too. The presence of rhythm without sound, of purpose without explanation. Nabda isn't lost. It's paused. The sky is still here. The same stars return. The sun still rises over the same edge of the horizon. Hands that placed these stones are gone, but their intention remains. There is something humbling about that. You, with your modern knowing, your language and lights, your days arranged by hours, you sit now in the geometry of an older wisdom, and you do not understand it. Not entirely, but you feel it. A sense that knowledge does not have to shout. That sacred does not require scale. That sometimes the most enduring truths are those shaped in quiet hands and left for the wind to remember. As dusk settles in, the desert cools. The light becomes gold, then grey, then blue. You lie back, cradled by sand that once held fire pits and footpaths and stones aligned with stars. Overhead, the Milky Way stretches like a soft spine across the sky. It is no different than it was thousands of years ago. The same constellations drift into view. The same patterns move. Somewhere nearby, a fox crosses the old lake bed, silent. As sleep, you do not need to solve anything. You do not need to decode the past. The stones were not left here to be conquered by meaning. They were left here to teach stillness, to remind you that even in the oldest deserts, even beneath the driest sky, there were people who watched the stars not as scientists or storytellers, but simply as living things sharing the same breath as the night. Your breath slows. Your thoughts settle like dust after wind. You are no longer searching. You are simply here, present and welcome. The stone hands counted the rain, and now they count your dreams. You arrive before sunrise, long before the sky has chosen its color. The air is cool and thin, almost metallic in its quiet. Shadows lie in perfect rows, as if folded neatly by ancient hands. You stand at the base of a vast, straight avenue, so straight it seems the earth itself has been commanded to obey a line. This is Teotihuacan, the city where the gods were once made, or remembered, or born from stone. No one truly knows. But what is clear, what is felt immediately in your breath and bones, is that this city was built with intention. The avenue of the dead stretches before you like a silent river, paved in volcanic stone, flanked by platforms and plazas. It pulls you forward without effort, as if gravity itself has changed its direction. All of Teotihuacan is aligned, not randomly, not imperfectly, but according to the sun, the stars, and something deeper than both. It does not align to the cardinal directions. It aligns to light, to sacred geometry that speaks more to rhythm than to north. You walk slowly down this avenue now, your footsteps echoing softly in the morning quiet. Around you rise the great structures, the pyramid of the moon behind you, and ahead the vast bulk of the pyramid of the sun, not steep like Egyptian pyramids, but wide and waiting, as if built to hold not just stone but silence. You climb it slowly, not for the view, but for the shift. Each step lifts you out of the present. At the top, you do not look out, you look inward. The city is not just a place, it's a pattern. No one knows who built Teotihuacan, not exactly. The people who lived here left no written records behind, no king lists, no poetry carved in stone. By the time the Aztecs arrived centuries later, the city was already a ruin, but a holy one. They gave it its name, Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. And even they treated it with reverence, not ownership. What we do know is this Teotihuacan was enormous, home to over 100,000 people at its height. It had multi-story apartments, drainage systems, wide plazas, open-air temples, and murals in colors that still cling faintly to weathered walls. Its economy was vibrant, its rituals complex, but above all, it was arranged, planned, set to a blueprint that favored symmetry and split lines, a city that faced not outward to the world, but upward. Toward meaning. You sit now at the edge of a stepped platform, fingers resting on cool stone. The surface is pitted with time, but beneath your palm, you can still feel the care that placed it here. You close your eyes and let the city speak without words. You feel it in the angles, in the balance between space and weight, in the way wind moves along the corridor of the avenue as if invited, not incidental. Below, in the shadows, are the remnants of temples, altars, homes, but also secrets. Beneath the pyramid of the sun, a cave. Beneath the temple of the feathered serpent, tunnels filled with mercury and strange orbs of mica and gold. These are not merely architectural decisions. They are echoes of beliefs we no longer understand, arranged in layers, sky, earth, and underworld woven into stone. And yet, for all its scale and mystery, Teotihuacan did not last. Around the 6th century, something shifted. The city began to decline. Its temples were abandoned. Some were burned. Its population thinned. The reasons are debated: climate, unrest, internal shifts. But the city itself remained, empty but not, erased, waiting, watching, even now. The alignment remains intact. The sun still rises at the same point along the avenue, casting shadows that fall precisely where they were meant to fall. You lie back now on the ancient stones, your body, held by centuries. The sun is rising. Light spills down the avenue as if poured from some celestial jar. You feel no fear here, no urgency, only awe, and beneath that, comfort. Someone once planned this city to face the stars. Someone believed that by aligning stone with sky, something important could be kept whole. And now, as your breath slows, you carry a fragment of that belief into your sleep. That if you hold still long enough, if you arrange your thoughts like plazas and your memories like stepped pyramids, the night will rise gently around you, and the stars will come exactly where they're supposed to be. Teotihuacan did not vanish. It rests, facing always the right direction. And now, so do you, far out in the Pacific, where the ocean folds into itself in slow, glimmering sighs. There is a reef so broad it seems to cradle a world of its own. You drift there now, not in a boat, not in a dream exactly, but in that soft in-between space where water becomes memory. There is no horizon you can hold, only sky above, salt in the air, and a strange hush below. Then, almost without warning, it rises black stone over green water, laid out not in chaos, but in careful, floating geometry. This is Nan Madol, the city built on tide. The sea is calm here, but it has not always been. And yet, still the city stands. 80 small islets, each one shaped by hand, bordered with basalt, linked by canals that glisten like quiet veins. You glide between them now, your breath sinking to the slow lapping of brine against stone. The blocks are enormous, some over 50 tons, stacked in alternating layers, like a woven wall of cooled lava. No mortar binds them, only balance, only the weight of choice. Nan Madol lies off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia, and though it is often called the Venice of the Pacific, it is something stranger, something more deliberate. It wasn't built for commerce or conquest. It was built, it seems, to set apart, to separate. This was a sacred space, a royal space, a ceremonial world floating just beyond the everyday, not to dominate nature, but to arrange it. A city built in the sea, for the sea, shaped like thought made tide. You drift past walls of Nandawas, the central islet, where the high chiefs once lived and where bones were placed into coral tombs. The air here is heavy, not with heat, but with hush. No birds call, no wind whistles, only the quiet sound of time brushing past forgotten stone. You imagine the rituals that may have taken place here, not loud, not theatrical, but precise. The clatter of shells, the sway of palm firelight, the salt-slick voices rising like mist over black stone. The people who built this place, the Çatalhöyük dynasty, arrived before memory, their origins layered in myth. Some say they came from the west, others say they came from under the sea. All agree they brought order and built with a kind of serene insistence. The city was their law, but even they, in time, lost their grip. Stories tell of tyranny, of unrest, of revolt. Eventually, the last Çatalhöyük was overthrown. The city emptied, not with violence, but with tide. You step gently onto one of the islets now, barefoot, your feet finding purchase on warm volcanic stone. There is no roof, only sky. No ceremony now, only echo. The jungle has begun to reach inward, sending roots down between the basalt logs, vines tracing forgotten rooms. You sit where someone once waited, a priest perhaps, or a grieving daughter. You do not need to know who, only that they were once still here. To dot Nan Madol does not explain itself. It rests, and in its rest it teaches you a different way of remembering, one where nothing needs to be written, one where memory is shaped in water and coral and stone so heavy it refuses to speak quickly. You cannot rush here. You can only float, only breathe, only listen. The sun begins to slide behind a low cloud. The canals shift color from green to pewter to ink. The ocean breathes beneath you, slow and eternal. You lie back on a bed of stone softened by moss, and your body follows the rhythm of the tide. You are not in the past. You are simply beyond explanation. drifting in the same water that once carried the builders' boats, the stone, the silence. There is no story to solve, no secret to crack. Nan Madol remains because the sea allowed it, and now it waits, not for discovery, but for quiet. You, too, are allowed to drift now. Let the tide take your thoughts. Let the canals carry your dreams. The city floats, and so do you. You begin in the quiet of early dawn, long before the birds stir, long before sunlight softens the edge of things. The hills around you are gentle, dust-colored, rippling like waves of old memory. There are no towers, no gates, no signs of war, and yet from a distance the place feels fortified, as if it once held back something vast. You draw closer, and it reveals itself not in height or scale, but in depth. Stone circles sunk into earth, pillars rising like ancient vertebrae, carvings older than writing. You have arrived at Göbekli Tepe, the hill of the navel, the world's first known sanctuary. It sits in southeastern Turkey, where plains give way to soft ridges and the sky meets stone without interruption. There are no cities nearby, no river, to explain its rise. And yet, over 11,000 years ago, before pottery, before cities, before agriculture had truly rooted, people gathered here and carved monuments out of raw limestone. They dug into bedrock and shaped it into language, not words, but symbols, images, visions, stories told in the curve of a fox's tail, the arc of a vulture's wing, the weight of a lion watching in stillness. You walk between the pillars now, some over 16 feet tall, each standing in a ring, encircling an open center like an ear tuned toward the sky. They are not random. Each pair of central stones faces inward, carved with abstract arms and hands, their presence more human than any statue you've seen. They do not shout, they watch. They hold silence the way a priest holds prayer, with reverence, not possession. The carvings are clean and precise. You see snakes, birds, bulls, and always eyes, watching from stone, from shadow, from memory. These were not decorations. They were offerings, intentions, ways of keeping the unseen close. There were no settlements around Göbekli Tepe, no farms, no homes, and yet people came here, from miles away, from scattered camps and wandering bands. They came to build, not out of necessity, but belief. This was not a fortress. It had no walls for defense, and yet it feels protected by time, by silence, by the depth of the earth itself. After centuries of use, the people who built Göbekli Tepe buried it carefully, deliberately. Each circle was filled with rubble, as if sealing in something sacred, not destruction. Preservation, a slow burial, not of forgetting, but of offering. And then they left, or moved, or changed, and the hill became a hill again. You pause beside a pillar, resting your hand on stone carved when mammoths still roamed. Your fingers trace the line of a crouching feline, so detailed it seems to breathe. This was made with stone tools, by hands, that had not yet planted fields, had not yet tamed rivers, and yet this complexity, this beauty, this knowing. You sit now on the edge of a low wall, legs folded beneath you, the morning warming slowly. The air holds stillness like water in a bowl. You do not need to understand the rituals that took place here. You only need to feel the intention. This was a place to mark turning points, seasons, lives, the movement from one way of being to another, a threshold made of stone, a gathering of those who felt that something larger was watching, and chose to build in return. Göbekli Tepe rewrites history, but it does so gently. It does not demand recognition. It does not proclaim itself the first. It simply is. Older than cities, older than books. A structure made by hands that had not yet learned to farm, but had already learned to kneel. The sun rises now, casting thin golden light between the standing stones. Shadows stretch, joining in a circle that does not close. You lie back on the warm earth, your body sinking slightly into the hill. You feel the presence of time, not as pressure, but as depth. And beneath you, the buried circles sleep on, content to be unseen. The watchers do not ask for answers, they wait. And tonight, as your breath deepens and your thoughts blur, you wait with them, not to know, but to dream. You arrive not from above, but from below, your feet tracing a narrow path cut into sandstone, your hands steadying against stone smoothed by centuries of palms. You are in the four corners now, where Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona meet in ancient conversation. The air is dry, but carries a kind of coolness you can't name, a quiet resilience. Around you rise the cliffs of Mesa Verde, sculpted not by hand, but by wind, water, and time. And nestled within those cliffs, tucked under stone ledges, hidden from plain sight, are homes, dozens, hundreds, entire villages carved into shadow. They are not ruins in the usual sense. Nothing crumbled, nothing fell. The buildings are still here, neat rectangular rooms, kivas shaped like ceremonial thought, ladders climbing into silence. Everything is where it should be, but no one remains. The ancestral Pueblones who built these dwellings with adobe and intention, who lived here for generations, they left. Not suddenly, not chaotically, but finally, and the reasons why are still folded into the curves of these cliffs. You step into one of the larger dwellings. Cliff Palace, its name given later by others. Its stone walls glow in soft orange light, kissed by sun bouncing off the canyon. You walk slowly past round ceremonial chambers sunken into the ground, and rooms barely large enough for sleeping. Each corner carries soot from fires long gone. Each beam still holds the weight of thought. You run your hand along the wall. The stones do not speak. They listen. This was a place of community, not power. People lived close here, not crowded, but connected. Families shared walls. Voices carried between rooms. The day was organized by the sun's path, the seasons, the planting of corn, the gathering of beans. Ceremonies were held beneath wooden roofs in round kivas, where the spirit world and the earthly world met through smoke and song. The cliff wasn't a hiding place. It was a shelter from heat, from storm, from all that time forgets too quickly, and yet something changed. Around the 13th century, people began to leave. The homes were not destroyed. The pottery was not all taken. Some rooms still held tools, sealed by time and silt. There are theories, drought, crop failure, shifting alliances. But here, in this moment, none of them matter. What matters is that you feel it. This was a place too full of memory to remain. The cliffs knew too much. And sometimes, when a place becomes too weighted with presence, it must be released. You sit now at the edge of a dwelling's threshold, legs folded under you, the canyon spreading out in golden silence. Below, the valley breathes, slow, ancient, and steady. Hawks circle far overhead. A breeze slips between stones, brushing your skin like a whisper. You do not need to understand the rituals. You only need to witness their echoes. This was a place of balance. People and stone, sky and hearth, memory and breath. You imagine the final days here, not panicked, not sudden, but gradual. Ladders removed, rooms cleaned, fireplaces swept, stories whispered for the last time in the twilight of a chamber where moonlight once slid across the floor. The people didn't vanish. They moved, southward, to where the land still welcomed. Corn and ceremony. Their descendants live still, the Hopi, the Zuni, the Pueblo peoples carrying stories that began here and drifted onward like smoke. You lie back now, spine against ancient stone, gaze rising toward the smooth arch of the cliff above. The shelter holds you like a cradle. This place, though empty, is not abandoned. It waits with the patience of sandstone, the slow faith of soil. Even the silence here has memory. You can feel it in your breath as it slows, in your thoughts as they settle, in your eyes as they begin to close. Mesa Verde is not forgotten. It is paused. A story set down mid-sentence, not because it was lost, but because the land needed to breathe, and so do you. The sea around Sardinia does not rush. It hums. You feel it long before you see it, that deep, tidal rhythm woven into the air itself, a breath that belongs more to time than to water. The island rises gently from the Mediterranean, sun-warmed and wind-shaped, a green-brown patchwork of hills and stone and memory. You are far from the old heartlands of empire, beyond Rome, beyond Athens, beyond Babylon, and yet here, scattered across fields and slopes and empty ridgelines, stand thousands of stone towers, each one quiet, each one watching. These are the Nuraj. You approach one now, its shape unmistakable even in ruin. A round, massive structure made of basalt boulders, not small ones, but stones the size of armchairs, placed together without mortar, without metal tools, without blueprints. It looks like a lighthouse that has forgotten the sea, a fortress with no enemy. You walk slowly around it, your fingers brushing the rough, sun-cracked surface. The tower doesn't rise sharply. It swells wider at its base, narrowing toward a top that once held more. Many are broken now. The centuries took their ceilings, but left their shape. Inside, it's cooler, darker. The space curves inward like a womb or a well, the air still, the light thin. You step into a central chamber where once a fire might have burned. The smoke would have risen through an opening above. The people who built this place around 1600 BCE left no writing, no royal names, but they left these, over 7,000. Nuraj, scattered across the island like punctuation marks in a poem we never learned to read. You wonder, what were they for? Theories stack like stones, fortresses, temples, meeting halls, beacons, homes. Maybe they were all of these, maybe none. What matters more is that they were built not to impress, but to last, and they have. Where palaces crumbled and columns fell, the Niraj remain. Not pristine, not proud, just ... steady. You climb the inner stairway, its spiral worn smooth by centuries of footfall. Above you, sky. Around you, silence. From the top, you look out over vineyards and olive groves, over villages and stone fences and roads that no longer lead to war. There are no monuments here to victory, only presence. These towers were not part of a grand city. They were alone, or sometimes in clusters, but always with space between them, like thoughts spoken softly across great distances. The Nuragic civilization, as we now call it, lived without writing, but not without story. Pottery, tools, and sacred wells remain. Carvings of ships, images of horned warriors, bronze statuettes of mothers holding children. They traded with the Mycenaeans, the Phoenicians, perhaps even the Egyptians. But their towers remain there. Greater sentence. A language of stone, spoken in circles and stillness. You sit now at the tower's edge, legs dangling over rock shaped by hands long gone. The sun is low. The sky melts into a gentle gradient, apricot and slate. Somewhere, below, the faint rustle of sheep and wind through grass, and behind that, deeper still, a kind of silence that feels deliberate, as if the land itself agreed to keep watch with the stones. There is something calming in a structure that has no agenda. It doesn't seek to teach or impress. It doesn't need to be solved. It simply is, and maybe that is enough. You breathe, deeply inhaling the same air that passed through these towers for millennia. You are not apart from it. You are part of its pores. As you lie back against the warm stone, the stars begin to emerge, slowly, shyly. Above you, the night stretches like it always has, and the tower, though no longer lit by fire, still holds space, still keeps time. The Nuraj do not forget. They do not command. They only remain. And tonight, so do you. The plain stretches out, like a forgotten canvas, flat, beige, barely breathing beneath the soft weight of sky. You walk through this landscape slowly, your footsteps raising small clouds of dust, your mind not expecting anything grand. There are no columns, no gates, no towers rising into myth. But then you see it, a gentle mound, no more than a low hill, worn smooth by time and wind. This is Çatalhöyük, one of the world's first cities. It does not announce itself. It invites you in with silence. You step into it not through a gate, but through a roof. The houses here were built side by side, packed tight like cells in a beehive, with no streets in between. People moved across the rooftops, climbed down ladders into rooms where firelight flickered and meals were shared. No palaces, no temples, no tombs of kings. Every home held life and death together, and every roof was a path. Inside a room, you sit cross-legged on a plastered floor. The walls are whitewashed, and images dance across them, bulls with heavy horns, vultures with outstretched wings, human figures in patterns that feel more rhythm than narrative. The past lives here not in grandeur, but in repetition. The hearth sits low in the corner. Nearby, a raised platform, not just for sleeping, but for burying. Bodies were interred beneath the floor, layered with memory, wrapped in red ochre. The living sat above the dead. They remembered without words. This city, over 9,000 years old, was not ruled. No grand avenue cut through it, no hierarchy carved into stone. What held it together was a different kind of architecture, one of ritual, cooperation, and repetition, each house a rhythm, each wall a story, each rooftop another note in a slow, quiet song. You walk now along what once would have been the top of the city, the place where movement happened. Children played, neighbors greeted, firewood was passed from hand to hand, and at night, families climbed out to look at the stars. You imagine how it must have felt, a city without noise, without hierarchy, drifting in time like a slow circle. Homes were rebuilt again and again in the same place, over the remains of the old. The city rose in layers, not outward, but inward. In one home, a woman presses pigment to wall, her fingers staining the surface with a soft spiral. In another, A man prepares a meal, not just for family, but for ceremony. Objects are buried with care, obsidian blades, beads, figurines, not to impress, but to honor. Their world was full of cycles, birth, death, planting, decay. And they drew those cycles with hands that understood how to build without dominating. You pause by a hearth and feel its memory. Warmth, long gone, but not forgotten. The air carries the scent of dust and earth and old fire. You do not feel alone here. You feel among. Even in absence, there is presence. Çatalhöyük lasted for centuries, slowly rising, slowly fading. Its people left not because of collapse, but because life moved on. New places, new needs. The old city sank under its own dust. Roofs fell in. Ladders disappeared. The rhythm broke, but beneath your feet, the layers still hold stories. You lie back now on the gentle slope of the mound. The sky above is the same sky they saw, vast, uncarved, full of slow stars. No monuments rise to define this place, but in the hush of night the rhythm returns. You feel it in your chest, in your breath, in the soft beat of sleep approaching. The city built no empires. It danced in circles and let itself be forgotten, softly. And now you drift to not into endings, but into the comfort of slow continuation. You sleep above a city that never asked to be remembered, but still echoes under your body in circles, in silence, in dust. You walk east now, toward a land that doesn't call out to be found, not with golden statues, nor with dramatic ruins thrust against the sky. Instead, it welcomes you with weathered plains, with broken tablets half sunk in silt, with silence thick as wool. This is Elam, the kingdom that stood before Persia, before the empire builders of Persepolis, a land with its own voice, its own script, its own gods, and yet a place that let itself be softened into someone else's memory. The air here is still and dry, edged with the faint smell of salt and earth. You pass through low hills where once walls stood, not in arrogance, but in quiet assertion. Elam was not a city, but a network of cities. Susa, its heart, now a scatter of carved stones and broken bricks, rests like a sleeping animal under a thin blanket of time. You place your hand on a column drum and feel the language in it, not words, but weight, not meaning, but patience. Elam was old even to the ancients. It rose alongside Sumer and Akkad, traded with Babylon, fought with Assyria, lived in the same poems as those who wrote the first laws and carved the first names. But Elam wrote its names differently, in a script still not fully understood. The Elamite language, elegant and strange, floats like a ghost between known tongues. You cannot read it, but you don't need to. It says something even now. We were here, we had a rhythm too. You wander through what's left of Susa's palace, its floor mosaics broken, its thresholds worn. At your feet, fragments of clay tablets, some still bearing sharp impressions of cuneiform, others with only soft grooves where fingers once pressed. The Elamites did not build to dazzle, they built to continue. Their architecture was low and wide, their cities hugged the ground, and yet they endured for over 2,000 years, not with conquest, but with coexistence. But then something changed, or rather, something gave way. The Persians came, not as invaders at first, but as inheritors, and Elam did not resist. It absorbed, it let its own language fade, it let its gods be renamed. It erased its signature, not with violence, but with a kind of graceful surrender. And by the time Cyrus rose and Persepolis glittered, Elam was already quiet. You sit now in the middle of a crumbled hall, its columns reduced to stumps, its roof long vanished. The wind moves through grass that grows between old foundations. Somewhere nearby, a shepherd walks with goats, unaware of the stones beneath him, and yet these stones remember, not loudly, not urgently, but fully. What does it mean, you wonder, to let go of identity? To let your name fade from your own lips, not in defeat, but in design. Elam was not conquered. It dissolved itself, gave way, chose rest over resistance. You think of all the stories told in thunder, and marvel at one told in hush. As the sky dims, you lie back on warm, dusty ground. A bird calls once, then nothing. The sun sets slow and wide, brushing gold across the scattered ruins. You feel your body matching that light, easing into the dark, not with fear, but with familiarity. Elam knew how to end without falling, and maybe that's what you're learning now, how to drift, not away, but inward. You don't need to be remembered loudly. You only need to have been, and that, tonight, is enough. The kingdom didn't crumble, it exhaled, and so do you. You've walked among pillars that lean into twilight, stepped through streets where footsteps stopped long ago, and listened to languages that no one reads anymore, but still speak in the way wind shapes a wall. You've rested where people once built not to conquer, but to belong, to stars, to rivers, to each other. And though their cities have faded, their quiet has not. Now your breath is slower, your thoughts softer, and somewhere inside you, a little dust has settled. In just the right place. Sleep well. The past will still be here tomorrow, resting, like you, in the gentle ruins of time.